Welcome to Gen 2 Hayabusa ECU flashing. The first thing you're going to want to do is visit ecueditor.com, and you're going to want to download one of the versions of software here. Present time 2.3 is the very latest with all the latest features. That's what I'm running on my computer. 2.2 has basically everything that's been released that's known to working, doesn't seem to have many bugs, etc. You're going to download one of those two. Depending on your computer, what you have installed, connection speed, processor speed, it could take a little while for that to install. It's probably going to prompt you once or twice for a computer reboot. But once that you have got that loaded, you're going to want to go to Petric and then K2, K7, K8, B-King flashing. And the very first thing you're going to want to do is go to Setup, Install COM port drivers. I want to say yes, I want to install them. Okay, then you're going to get this DOS window pop up that's going to show it's installing a driver. This is telling us that once it's installed, we should reboot our computer. For Windows 7 and Windows XP users, it may be necessary to run ECU Editor as a administrator, and I have that covered in my direction files on how to do that. On XP, that's not an issue. Windows 7 and Windows XP has some administration rights issues with assigning COM ports, etc. Okay, once we've done that, the next thing we're going to want to do is go ahead and plug in our USB cable. And it needs to be on COM 2 through COM 8 for the Gen 2 BUSA in order to be able to flash. Gen 1's a little different. It's COM 1 through 4. Gen 2 would be COM 1 through 8 that it needs to be on. Typically COM 1 is already taken up by something on your computer important, so I probably don't want to mess with that. My particular one here, I'm pretty sure it's coming up as COM 7, so I'm not going to have any issues with that. If you do need to change it though, you can go into your control panel and right mouse click on that, and unfortunately my computer is very slow while it's making videos here. But once you're sure you've got your COM port set properly, and that's also covered in my directions files since I can't get it to load on the video here, you're going to want to go to File, New, and then 2008. And it's going to tell me a new Gen 2 base map is generated. This is the USA file that's in all of the USA bikes in Canada, etc. California has a different ECU, Europe has a different ECU, some of those things, but you can pick that in the Advanced Settings tab later before you flash. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK. Alright, so I've already installed my COM port driver. I rebooted when it told me to. I came back into the program here, and I'm trying to get rid of that message there. So the next thing you want to do is set up the COM port. We need to tell ECU Editor what COM port we're on. So we're going to go into the Connect for Engine Data. It's going to tell me interface needs to be set. Select the correct COM port on the following engine data monitoring screen. And hit OK. The upper right hand corner, we're going to see, let me drag this over so we can see it better. A couple different COM ports. I know for a fact mine is COM 7. I verified that in my device manager by unplugging it, plugging it back in. I could see COM 7 go away, come back. I click that. Okay, at this point, you're going to want to have the USB cables plugged into the computer, obviously. You want to be plugged into the bike. This is very, very important. The bike needs to be in neutral with the run switch on and the key on. The bike should be in a position where it could start by just pulling in the clutch and pushing the starter button. If the bike is in gear, the run switch is off, anything like that, the ECU does not get power. You cannot connect to it to look at engine data. You cannot connect to it to flash it. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm on the desktop here, but my ECU is powered up. Your bike's in neutral, your run switch is on. Your key is on. I'm going to go ahead and hit connect. And my computer is very slow when I'm making the video. This should happen within a couple of seconds as you're doing it. You're going to see this light goes to yellow, and eventually it's going to turn green. I think it might even take like a minute on this video here. Normally it happens in a couple of seconds. Capturing video really slows down the processor. You should see it go green. We'll actually see our temp gauge come up. Then we'll actually start to see values over here, as well as I'm going to get a whole bunch of error codes because I've got nothing plugged into this ECU. There are no sensors plugged into it. It's just powered up on a desktop. So we will patiently await this. Then you can see up here at the top it's telling me it's synchronizing. Alright, finally, we're starting to go green there. You can see the light lit up green. It's still kind of taking its time there. This is, I can see that I'm starting to get some sensor values. It's telling me there's timing, ignition voltage, coolant temperature, etc. And you can see I've set off about every code that you can set off because there's nothing plugged into the bike. The ECU right now doesn't think it's in neutral. It thinks it's in the MS1 map. The pair valve is turned off. Secondary throttle plates are not opened, etc. This doesn't mean much on a bench top, but once you're actually plugged into the bike, this will make more sense. You should be able to grab a hold of your throttle, go from nothing to wide open throttle, see your TPS change here, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and close this off. And I'll quickly walk you through some of the real basic things that people like to do. We can go into the limiters here. I can bump up my rev limiter a little bit, a couple hundred RPM. This gear limiter's on, gear limiter's removed. That basically will take off your 6-gear restriction, the 186 mile an hour governor. And then we've got fuel and soft cut and hard cut. Soft cut limiters when you pull fuel out of 2 cylinders, which on a completely stock bike doesn't really hurt anything. On a turbo or a nitrous injected bike, this can cause meltdowns, and a hard cut would be the way to go. It is a pretty abrupt feeling when you hit a hard cut limiter. So like I said, if you're running just a stock bike with a pipe or something, you feel free to leave that on soft cut. You can hit OK. Advanced settings. In here we've got flashing dyno mode, fast and normal. Really, there's no reason to mess with this. It pretty much will determine what type of flashing it does on its own for you anyway. What a lot of people might do if you've got a pipe on, this is your O2 sensor, you can turn that off. This is the pair valve, you can turn that off. If you're using a non-USA bike ECU, you got European, California, and then there's the generic version in here that you could pick. I'm going to leave that on USA. I'm going to close that off, and if I want to go ahead and flash this ECU now, again, I need to have the key on the bike in neutral, the run switch on. Okay, on my box here, I'm going to go ahead and flip the toggle switch to flash, which it was previously in the engine data position. Should have specified that earlier if I didn't, I can't remember. So I'll go ahead and put that to flash on the box. Okay, at this point I'll hit flash the ECU. And first it's telling me it's going to wipe the memory clean of the ECU, and that's going to write the entire contents. It's about a meg file. It typically takes a little over 4 minutes to do a complete flash. Now once you've done a complete flash and you are still in the software, you haven't closed the software down, each additional flash that you do, say you change just the rev limiter, or you change a fuel table or an ignition table, it only flashes the part of the ECU that it changes after it's done a full flash when the software's been open. So it takes 4 minutes the first time, but when you're on the dyno and you're doing your tuning, each additional flash takes 15, 20, 25 seconds. So it's actually relatively fast. So like I said, this is going to take about 4 minutes. I won't make you watch the whole thing here. When it gets all done, it's going to tell me flash complete, switch, toggle switch to engine data position, and then this little screen will go away. At that point, the fuel pump on your bike should prime, and it should be ready to start. I should also mention when you are connected to the bike with the USB cable, with the harness that goes to it and everything, if the flasher box is in the flash position, your fuel pump on your bike should not prime. You should not be able to start your motorcycle. If you can, if the fuel pump does come on, either you've wired the fuel pump differently, or, this is probably 90% of all my tech calls, you have not inserted the wires either correctly into the ECU connector, meaning they're, the brown and the blue wire are swapped, or they're swapped at the black Yosh connector, or the pins aren't fully seated. This is what seems to give people most of the problems, is not actually pushing the pin in until it clicks. On the ECU connector, you pull it off the ECU and there's an orange cap on the front. You want to pop that orange cap off so that the ECU pin inserts from the back, and it needs to come all the way up and look and come flush with the edge of the connector, just like all the other pins are, and you should hear it click. If you don't, and the fuel pump and stuff is coming on, you need to investigate that. I get a lot of people call and don't want to go through the hassle, but that's always the issue. So that's the intro setup, and I'll go ahead and shut this off now. Like I said, about 2 minutes later, it should